everybody. I hope you guys are doing good and I hope you're enjoying this new year. As you can see, we got some beautiful snow today, the day I am filming, and it is just gorgeous outside right now. I love the winter time. Even though I don't like being cold, when it snows, the beauty of the white just reminds me of God's forgiveness and just how much He actually loves us. So we are going to focus on God's love this month in our art projects. We all know Valentine's Day is in February, so we are going to take that and we are going to talk about God's love and do a fun art project together. I'm back in the house. I have my nice cup of tea and I am ready to do some art with you guys. Now, the project for the month is conversation hearts. Now, maybe some of you have had these candies. Maybe some of you are like, what's conversation hearts? Well, they're little tiny heart powdery kind of type candies that usually have little messages on them that says like, hug me or you rock or something like that. But for our conversation hearts, we're going to use words that describe biblical love. And we can get help with that by turning to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, also known as the love chapter, and starting at verse 4. I'm just flipping through my Bible. Actually, I'm borrowing my son's Bible at the moment. It goes into telling us what love is. Now, this is the King James Version. So instead of using the word love, it uses the word charity. So whenever you hear charity, that's love, okay? Again, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, starting with verse 4, going through verse 6. Charity, love, suffereth long, and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. And now moving on to verse 7. Beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Now, some of that may be hard to fit on one little conversation heart. So I went in and I kind of just found some of the shorter words. Or, for instance, it says, hopeth all things. In verse 7, I used the word hopes. It also says, well, there's the short one like kind. Charity suffereth long, right at the beginning of verse 4. Patience. So I put patient. So I kind of condensed it down into one word if possible. At the end, another example would be, let's see, beareth all things, believeth all things, trusts. So I put trust there in the green heart. So that's some way that you can kind of condense this down into maybe one word that you can fit on your heart. As you can see, I kind of just stuck with the hopes, the kind, the trust, and the patient. And of course, I had to put love. So you can do that too, or you could also think of maybe forgive, or God calls us to serve others too. We can love others by serving them as well. So maybe you could use the word serve on one of your hearts. But again, you can think about that as we work on the project. So why don't I go ahead and tell you the materials you're going to need, and we will start making our conversation hearts. The materials you're going to need for this month's project is a piece of white paper from your drawing pad, or just a piece of white copy paper will work, your markers, your crayons, a pencil and eraser, a pair of scissors, and just a piece of scrap paper you might have lying around. Even if it's just a piece of notebook paper or something, you just want to grab that too. Now the first step in making our conversation heart project is we're going to make our heart template. Now this is the heart template that I made just using some scrap paper. And I made a heart template approximately 4 inches by 4 inches. And then I am using a piece of copy paper actually, which is around 8.5 by 11 inches to just give you an idea of my sizes here. But you can make your hearts as big or as small as you want. But first you just want to go ahead and grab a piece of scrap paper. This is a little bit of wrinkled paper that I'm just going to use. And I'm just cutting out a basic square. And you just need to think about the size you want your heart template to make sure you cut a big enough piece. And then I'm just going to fold my square in half like this. And then I'm going to grab my pencil, and then on the fold of the paper where there's a crease, I'm going to draw half a heart. So I'm going to start at the top of my square and I'm going to draw half a heart shape, making sure I'm drawing off of the fold of my paper. So you should have something like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut that out with my scissors. Now I tried to make my heart template kind of a little short and stout, I guess you could say, because conversation hearts are a little more, they're not really long and narrow. And so I just kind of was trying to make my heart represent the shape of a conversation heart. But you don't have to be worrying about making that too exact. Just make a nice heart shape that you're content with. And then after I cut my heart out, I just rounded off the tip so it wasn't so pointy at the end. And then you should have a heart template. Once you have your heart template, it's time to grab your white piece of paper and it's time to think about the composition of your project. Basically, your layout. How do you want your project to look? Now, I went for the effect that I took a box of conversation hearts and I just poured them out onto the table and they just scattered. So you see the front of some and you see the back of others. I'll also explain why I did that a little bit later in the video as well. So basically, you just want to take your heart, and again, depending on how big your heart is or how small your heart is will depend on how many you get on your paper, and how, it also depends on how scattered you want them to look. So just think about how you want your composition of your project to look. And just start laying your heart template down and tracing around your heart and creating your conversation hearts. Once you have all your hearts traced on your paper and you're happy with the layout, it's time to think about what you want your conversation hearts to say. Now, again, if you remember back to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we read about what love is, what biblical love is. And some of those words were love is patient, love is kind, it always trusts, it always hopes. So those are the words that I chose to put on my conversation hearts to describe love. Now you could also use words like forgive or serve, those different words that describe the love that God calls us to have for each other. So go ahead, think about the words you want to use, and then get your pencil. And if you remember seeing conversation hearts, usually the letters are written in all caps. So I just tried to center my word in the center of my heart, and then I used all caps to just resemble the lettering on a real conversation heart. So, for example, I'll come up to my heart in the corner, and I am just going to write in all caps, love. Just doing the best I can to try to center it in the heart. So there's love, and maybe I'll write hope. Again, be aware of how hard you press with your pencil, because I'll be honest with you, when I did the first project, I erased quite a bit, and you just don't want to be putting those indentations into your paper by pressing hard with your pencil, because when you erase it, you still keep that imprint on your paper, and then when you go to color, it can shine through your crayon that you're coloring. So just keep that in mind. Just press lightly. And if you are someone who likes to have things nice and even, you can also take your ruler and you can just make a couple guidelines with your ruler to try to help keep your letters the same height, or you can just eye them. It's up to you. So you can make a couple guidelines and then you could just write. Now I made this bigger than my other letters, but I just was trying to show you a quick example here of what you can do. These are pretty big letters, but that's okay. And then that will help you keep the height of your letters even, and then you'd just go in and you would just erase those guidelines on the top and the bottom. So go ahead, think about what words you want to put on your hearts, and go ahead and write those in. Now let's take a minute and talk about why we're using marker and crayons. We're using crayons to color in our hearts because, well, a couple reasons. Conversation hearts are kind of like that powdery candy, so I felt like the crayon gave me more of that texture to resemble more of like that powdery texture of a conversation heart. Also, it was just easier to use crayon over top the marker because the lighter colors of the crayon you can color right over your marker and it doesn't affect it. So honestly, it was just easier, but I did not want to lose the nice clean lines of my heart shape. So I used my marker to outline my heart. So in the end, after it was all colored in, you still see the nice clean heart shape of your hearts. And again, I like the different textures. I like mixing medias to just get different textures in the project. So that is why we're using markers and crayons. Once you have all your words written on your hearts, it's time to grab your markers. And we are going to start coloring our project in. But we are going to start by outlining our words and outlining our hearts in marker. Now, I used red for my words because pretty much all the conversation hearts I have seen, the words have been red. So I wanted to make these look true to conversation hearts, so I used red to outline all my words. And then I used whatever color I was going to make that heart, I used that color of marker to outline that heart. So for example, as you can see, I have a couple outlined here already in red. And let's say I outline this down here. I'll outline hope. Now, as you can see, some of my words are a little different on this one. I took out the word is and I took off some of my S's, so just ignore those because I changed things kind of as I went. Okay, so I outline my word in red, and then let's say I'm going to make this a green heart. So I'm going to take my green marker and I'm going to outline the heart in green. So I have something that looks like that. Once you have all of your hearts and your words outlined with your marker, it's time to grab your crayons and start coloring. So I just grabbed the color of crayon that was similar to the color of marker that I outlined that heart in. So I made this a pink heart, so I grabbed my pink crayon and I just went ahead and I just started coloring in my heart. Now, as I color, I'm going to explain to you when you choose the colors of crayons, the lighter colors like your pink, your yellow, your light oranges, your light greens, they will color over your red marker and they will not affect your red marker and your word. So you don't have to worry about trying to color around every individual letter. So most of my colors I had no problem with. The problem came in when I wanted to have a purple heart. And I grabbed my purple crayon and I'll just grab a word here and I'll show you what happens here. If you take the purple and you color over your red marker, well, you can kind of see very quickly, it pretty much colors right over my marker. So I wanted to have a purple heart in my project, so I just made the purple one of the hearts that were flipped and you saw the back of. So I was still able to add that color, like if you wanted a purple or a blue, but I didn't have to worry about it ruining my word. Now maybe you have a box of crayons that has a lot more selection and you have like a nice light purple or lavender or light blue. It might not be a problem. If there's a color you want to use and you're not sure if it's going to ruin your word or not, get a scrap piece of paper, make a red marker line on it, color over it with that crayon and see what happens. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you're coloring in your hearts. The lighter colors are much kinder to your red marker. So go ahead and start coloring in your hearts and have fun. Once you have all your hearts colored in, it's time to think about how you want to complete your background, the space between your hearts. Now maybe you look at it and you're done. Maybe you like the white background. Maybe there's no background to color in because you just filled it up with hearts and you might be done at this point. But maybe you look at it and you're like, I just think it needs a little more. I wanted to add a little more color. I chose to color it in with a blue marker because I liked how the lighter colors just popped on this pretty blue. So I just chose to color the space between my hearts in with another solid color of marker. And I used marker because I liked the smooth texture, the contrast between the marker with the crayons and the heart. I felt like it helped my hearts pop out a little more. So when you think about your background, you could do it as simple as just coloring it one solid color. Maybe you have, depending on how many hearts you put on your paper and how big or small your hearts are, maybe you have quite a bit of space between your hearts, and maybe you want to get a little more creative and put like a pattern behind your hearts, like black and white checkers or something. So you can just really think outside the box. Or again, you could say, I like the white and I think I'm done. But go ahead, and if you want to add a little more into your background, go ahead and do that at this time. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the project for the month. This is one last look of my final project. And I look forward, as always, to see what you guys came up with. And I hope this project acted as a good reminder of how we can share God's love with other people by being kind, by being patient. And also, let's always remember that we are so truly loved by God, and He loves you guys very much. Well, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your month, and Lord willing, I will see you in next month's video. Bye.